Hello, everyone. This is Rosalind Sedacca, and you're listening to Rosalind Sedacca on divorce, dating, and empowered living on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo network. And as you know, we talk about everything related to breakup, separation, divorce, dating, and relationships after divorce, all under the umbrella of protecting the children we love. And all of our guests are experts who are very child-centered, family-focused, and that's why you're here, and that's why I love to have these conversations. And today, I'm very excited to be introducing you to another person who is a wonderful expert, and I wanted to tell you about our guest, Judith Weigle. Judith is an award-winning divorce mediator who started with the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office in 2010, and then moved on to private practice in her company, Divorce Resource, Inc. in 2012. She later created her podcast, The Amicable Divorce Expert, which she really is. And that's a vehicle to educate spouses about all aspects of divorce, to get people thinking differently about divorce, along with providing resources through professionals who are interviewed on her show. And I'm very excited to tell you that I will be one of the guests on her show coming up soon. And today with us, she'll be sharing her knowledge about the most successful way to divorce, even in a difficult situation, and especially when you're a parent. So welcome, Judith.
Rosalind, this is so wonderful to be here with you. I loved when we first met each other. I love what you're doing with your podcast, and I love that it's child-centered. As much as we all try and make things child-centered when we're divorcing, quite often there's too much grief to go through, and we only have so much of ourselves to give, and we have to get ourselves out of pain. This is a huge dilemma that people are in.
Well, you're absolutely right about that. And I felt very aligned with you when we talked. So I think this is going to be a valuable conversation for everyone. And the first thing I wanted to ask you is there an approach to divorce that would make the entire experience better? Because if people can get a grasp of that right from the get-go, it would certainly simplify the process for everyone.
Yes, and it's found, shameless self-promotion here, it's found in what I created called the Recipe for a Heart-Healthy Divorce. Wow. The Recipe for a Heart-Healthy Divorce actually provides people with a blueprint to get through the divorce in ways that you and I know individually, because we work with the approach that I outline in the recipe. We work with this on a daily basis, but I never saw this, the 4 steps, the 4 ingredients put together. And if I can share them, very short.
Absolutely.
The 4 ingredients, and this is in order of how it has to unfold. Go through the emotional divorce before you file for the legal divorce. You don't have the bandwidth to do both. So going through the emotional divorce means going through the uncoupling process. You know, once you come to the awareness that marriage may not be long-term and that it has to end for whatever reason, it doesn't matter. There's emotions attached to that. It's called the uncoupling process. It's the grieving process. We need to go through the grieving process so that we can be focused and ready to make legal decisions once the filing process starts. Because when we start the filing process, if it's not a high conflict divorce, it's fairly simple paperwork, but it doesn't matter. If you're still in the emotional process of uncoupling, there's a lot of fear along with the grieving. And we're not able to make good financial and legal decisions for ourselves. So give yourself time. Number 2, learn communication skills for conflict. You're going to need them. Even if you are both interested in having an amicable divorce, it's the professionals you hire that are really in charge of you having an amicable divorce. We need to underscore that every second of every day when we talk to you. But What if you're married to somebody who has always been difficult to speak with? Well, you need to learn some techniques to move the divorce conversation forward. And I use a gentleman named Bill Eddy. Bill Eddy is well known among the professionals in the divorce arena, but I want everybody to go on Amazon and look up his books. Eddy is Eddy. About 30 books, all on how to communicate in a high conflict situation. It's so simple, so easy. And once you learn them, so successful. Number 3, I teach people how to compartmentalize time. So we tend to let anything that's overwhelming wash over us and take control of us. We think about it every second of every day, and we just can't afford that if we're working. I learned this from my clients. When they're calling me from work, trying to send me paperwork, and they're telling me they're just depressed and anxiety-ridden, the light went on, and I said, wait a minute, of course they are. How are they going to focus at work and focus on the divorce all at the same time? It's not possible. So I teach people how to compartmentalize time. And lastly, one of my favorites, choose a self-care program that includes laughter. Laughter is the best medicine. The Mayo Clinic says it. I've always said it. Laughter, it reprograms your brain. It makes you feel good. The endorphins come out and start working for you. And so when I talk about this, I say people need an approach. They need to know that there's an easy, well, in this case, 4-step program for them to tackle their divorce. It's not hiring a bully attorney. It's not, it's not looking at money initially. It's how do you center yourself and prepare yourself for this change in life.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I think those are 4 really important strategies. Love Bill Eddy's work. So I'm so glad to hear that you're referring him to other people. His books are wonderful. And the more we're skilled in these important arenas and facets of communication, the easier it's going to be short-term and definitely long-term. And that's what you and I are all about, because we both understand that when the divorce ends, that doesn't mean things stop. The co-parenting just begins, and you have decades and the rest of your life really ahead to be co-parenting in the best possible way. So this is wonderful advice. And since we are focused at the Child-Centered Divorce Network on divorcing with children, so share some of your best advice about being a parent going through divorce and how we can protect our kids.
Well, the very, very, very first thing is your children are involved in your divorce, whether you like it or not. We try and say we want to separate the kids. No, they're children in the divorce, just like their parents are. So the way you choose to divorce, you're blueprinting on them. They are living through your emotional state, your anger, your grieving, your forgiveness. They're living through all of that. And so please be mindful that even if you think you're keeping your feelings and comments away from them, how big is your house? The kids can hear, and they can see you being sad. They can overhear you talking to neighbors and, other moms of their friends. So they are in the divorce, and everything parents do affects their children. One of the first things, though, that I can deal with tangibly is helping parents look at the co-parenting schedule. I mean, that's a minefield unto itself, isn't it, Rosalind?
Oh, absolutely.
Here's how I approach it. When I'm in mediation with people, I say, let's first look at your child's schedule first. When do they get up? When do they have breakfast? When do they leave for school? When does school start? When do you pick them up? What kind of school programs do they have? Are there after-school programs? So let's lay out the child's school and activity and social schedule first. Now let's look at the parents' schedules. How can the parents' schedules adjust to the child's schedules? And that really gets people thinking in a very logical, way instead of an emotional way. Well, I want these days. No, I want these days. No, this is your child's schedule. How can you respond to that? And then you know that we have so many different types of schedules for them. There's 1 week on, 1 week off. There's every other day, which in my opinion is the worst schedule known to mankind. You are hauling your kids back and forth to each other's home every other day. How can they make plans with their friends? They're not master schedulers. If that's something parents like, I say, well, how about 2-2-3? Monday, Tuesday, one parent, Wednesday, Thursday, another parent, alternating weekends. So nobody's going too long without seeing their children. And the children at least have some breathing space. And one of my clients brought something up to me the other day in a mediation, and he said, the reason why I would like alternating weeks as my first choice would be I can spend real time with my kids. It's, because when we have an every other day schedule, my only job is bringing them to school, picking them up, feeding them. That's it. There's no continuity. There's no real attachment process with the parents. And I think parents have to think about that. I don't know of any other better schedules. Do you?
No, well, I think it really needs to be very unique for each family dynamic. So I encourage the families to do what you said initially. Really look at your schedules, and rather than be on rote, determine which parent is more available for when and how. And that's may change as the kids age, from younger kids to middle school kids to high school kids. A lot may shift and change, but it's really how the parents' relationships with the children meld well, so that you're doing what fits your family rather than coming up with a rule at this point and then 5 years later say, we made this rule 5 years ago and we have to stick with it. I really encourage a lot of fluidity if the co-parents have the ability to do that, and shift through the process. But we try to encourage them to develop a relationship that's like that, cooperative and fluid, because kids as they age, everything changes in their life, and your lives may change with work schedules and other dynamics. So it gives you the opportunity to really be able to shift as a family in as many ways as possible. And that, of course, is not always the way that works best for each family. But when they can, I give them a lot of credit. In my case, we literally talked on Sunday night and discussed our schedules, and it changed a little every week. I'll take them for 2 or 3 days. You'll take them for 2 or 3 days, but I have a meeting on Thursday in the middle of March. So can you take this and I'll swap with you next? And we just did it very fluidly, and it worked out for us. But not everyone has the ability to do that. And so using your guidance and structuring it in a way where the parents feel that they're spending genuine time with the kids is very important, very authentic. And I love what you're saying.
Well, thank you. But you actually raised a really good point that comes up a lot. And you said that the schedule that you're choosing now will more than likely change as the kids get older. So if you have younger children, adolescents, whatever, just younger children, not teenagers yet, it's one schedule. But then as the kids get older and they're on their own more and they want to be with their friends and they really can take care of themselves, it's going to be another schedule. So whatever we write in the settlement agreement, I do explain to people, get ready for it to change at some point in time. And that's really okay. It should. But I never heard of parents talking the beginning of a week and looking at their schedules and see how we can work together. Yeah. I mean, does it get any more amicable than that? It doesn't. It
worked out very amicably because we respected the fact that every week is a little different. I had more meetings and shifts and things in my work schedule, but we just accommodated each other. and it made for a very flexible situation. And my son either got off the school bus here or got off the school bus there. It was the same school, same community, and it was just a few blocks away. And we purposely made it that we didn't live that far away, so life would be minimally stressful for him.
Okay, so you're the poster parents for amicable, for fluid,
Yeah.
for respectful. This is it's rare. I mean, it's there, but it is rare, and that just warms my heart when I hear you say that.
I had friends. He was a therapist, and they bought houses next to each other. So they moved to houses next to each other, and the kids just went in and out of the both houses as if it was one house for the next 10 years until they were in their teens and became more autonomous. But it worked out perfectly for them, and they took vacations together. But this was a therapist and his wife, and they were child-focused, child-centered right from the get-go. Not everyone has that situation, and we have to adapt to whatever is real in our family dynamic. But I always remind clients that your divorce is unique, and don't do what your in-laws, your sister-in-law said to do, or your neighbor, or your cousin, because that's going to limit you and put binds on you that aren't realistic all the time.
Okay, so something else embodied in what you've been saying is, in order to have that type of relationship, if there was anything to forgive, it had to be forgiven. Mm-hmm. You went through all the emotions that are attached to a divorce, even in an amicable divorce. It's a big life change. And so you have to be okay with that. There can't be resentment. And you have to really understand, I think overall philosophically, that we're all human. We all make mistakes. Maybe the best intentions of both spouses, both parents, was to live happily ever after. And for whatever reason, it didn't take place like that. You can still live happily after individually.
Absolutely.
As you just described.
Judith, I'm going to stop us both for just a moment because we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back. So we're back. This is Rosalind Sedacca, and you're listening to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And our show is Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living with Rosalind Sedacca. And our guest is Judith Weigle, and we are having an animated conversation about how do we make co-parenting work, and how flexible can we be in the situation and still be honoring the needs of our children all the way through. So Judith, in the time we have left, I'm eager to hear any other insights you may have to share with us.
Okay, so one of the other bigger issues, as you well know, is dating after divorce.
Yes.
You can't stop people from dating. A lot of people love being in relationships. It's the healthiest thing for them, and that's fine. So how do you date and deal with your children? Well, when a big question is when to introduce a new partner to your children. And it seems like everybody across the board says when it's a long-term monogamous relationship, because your children have just been unearthed a little bit by the divorce and having to get used to two different households, maybe two different parenting styles, but the fact that the entire family is no longer in one home. The intention in dating after divorce is to possibly remarry and live together. And so there's that sensitivity in bringing somebody that you've had an opportunity to get to know into your home to meet your children. Have your children properly attached to both of you as individuals so that now there's room for them to accommodate another person? Does this other person really like children? I mean, there's so much to discuss. I always go back to the film Jerry Maguire, and Renee Zellweger was very careful not to introduce Tom Cruise to her son until she was completely convinced that they had a future together and that he liked kids. You know, so I heard one of my former clients years ago went from a legal separation to a divorce. And when he came back in to start the divorce process, I said, well, how are the kids? He had adolescents. He said, not good. And I said, why? What's going on? They both need therapy. Are you taking them? Yes, I am. Not opposed to it. But the issue is my new girlfriend who had her own home, but he had her come into his home. And on the days he had the children weren't ready to have another person enter their lives. They were still getting used to dad being by himself, and he couldn't understand that. And he said to me, and then I want you to comment on this, he said to me, but isn't my happiness important? I had an assistant at the time who had a very difficult situation with custody, and her child, she should never have hooked up with this one guy, but she had just come out of a tough situation, and she chimed in before I could even say anything, and she said, no, your happiness is less important than your children's happiness. This is all about you serving your children, and nobody's taking happiness away from you. Nobody's saying you shouldn't be seeing this person, simply saying, please accommodate your child until your children are settled. You don't need to bring somebody in your home who has their own home. I mean, please comment on this yourself.
I agree. We need to put ourselves in our children's shoes at whatever age they are and really feel it as they feel it and understand it as that child, because the security and the foundation of their lives is being thrown asunder. And one of the most important things is for children to feel entirely that they're loved by both parents and that they matter and that their feelings matter and that they're not in competition with anyone else for that parent's love. So it's very dramatic when you see your parents suddenly enamored with another person who you could see the look on their face. They're madly in love. They're in another planet. And very often there becomes a competition, which doesn't have to happen if it's handled properly, because the two loves are totally different. But kids have to understand that they come first and that they are not going to lose their parent to another person. And the parent has to remind them of that on a frequent basis so that they don't feel competition with another person who's coming into their life. It's a delicate dance, and it needs to be handled slowly and carefully and lovingly. And that's where the guidance comes in from coaches and mediators who understand these things, so that we don't run into these kinds of problems, because kids can hold you accountable years and years later and be very angry.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it still can be a win-win for everybody.
Of course.
Because nobody's saying the parents shouldn't have a relationship. The only issue is when to put your children with that other person. That's all. And if you take the right amount of time, I completely agree with you. If you take the right amount of time, your kids will really appreciate it. Now, if you have an extraordinary situation where there's been time and you really have tried as a parent and you still have a child who's resistant, maybe family therapy, step parent coaching. I mean, there are other resources that address the blended family dynamic, and it's an important dynamic to address. And I have over the last few years, I've heard of this being talked about more and more, how to address blended families.
I agree that it's much more common than it ever used to be, and it really needs to be addressed, because it's very likely that if you're divorcing in midlife, you're going to bump into a blended family situation or possibility. And it can be very confusing because there's so many delicate psyches involved on all levels, but it has to be handled professionally and lovingly and caringly. And all children want is to feel loved and to be able to love both parents. And so there are ways of handling that so that it's done in a simple process where the kids aren't overwhelmed and where the kids are slowly adapting, and when they're feeling heard and valued and acknowledged. And that's the key to making the process smooth and working out well.
You know, you just said something that got me thinking, and that is maybe the kids, I mean, they may not be the final arbiters, so to speak, of your new relationship, but at least having them come in and communicate about it. How do you feel about this person? Do you feel comfortable around this person? Engage them. That's the word I was looking for. Engage them in their observation.
Mm-hmm.
So that, yes, your words, so that they can feel heard, so that they can feel like they're an integral part of this new dynamic.
That's the important process. Absolutely. Makes all the difference.
Yeah.
I know that when children don't feel that way, that's when there's more drama and trauma in the family dynamic when that happens. So it's something that we can do, and it's something that you and I encourage parents to be aware of so that they can do it.
Yes. Yes. And then
so we are very close to ending. I want you to tell people how they can find you and access your services.
Thank you. Well, I have two websites. The website for my mediation service, and if you're in California, filing service, is divorceresourceinc.com, divorceresourceinc.com. If you would like to avail yourself of the topics and the guests that I have had over the past 4 years on my podcast, that address is theamicableddivorceexpert.com, theamicableddivorceexpert.com.
Wonderful. Well, we've been talking to Judith Weigle, who has a wealth of information and insight and a lot of caring and compassion about this topic, as you can tell. So I'm delighted that you've been with us today. Thank you so much, Judith.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I so respect what you do. So thank you for everything that you're doing too.
Thank you. And I hope you'll all join us again. This is Divorce, Dating, and Empowered Living on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And you're listening to Rosalind Sedacca. Join us again, because we're always talking to people who are compassionate and caring about the topic that means so much to us, protecting our children before, during, and long after divorce. Till next time, bye-bye for now.